This could be a performance art piece.
Oh, and now the recording has started, so now we're going to look like real geniuses.
Yeah, hopefully this can be edited.
Alex or Havo, do you guys have his phone number? Were you texting him?
I don't have his number. Havo?
Yeah, I have his. Hey, Chris, can you hear me? Houston to Chris.
I don't think he can hear us.
Or he's amazing at trolling us.
That's actually a real possibility. There.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
No.
Can you hear us now, Chris?
I can hear you now. Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, awesome. Yep.
There we go.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, I've got my podcast microphone. So hopefully it
Sweet.
sounds good. Yeah.
That's why you sound so smooth.
I feel like I should be like on a smooth jazz station. Welcome to KSNZ. KSNZ. Coming up, 6 hours of Kenny G.
Yeah.
Forget Kenny's A through F, because we've got Kenny G for the rest of the night. Here on Case News.
Loud sound effects optional. Okay, awesome. Well, now that you have both your podcast microphone and your podcast headphones,
Yeah.
Cool.
Plus your fishing hat.
Yeah, do we want to get going or wait a couple more minutes since we're having some issues and people might be still messing with that?
Look what I'm drinking, Havo.
I'm jealous.
Live Oak.
I was just there.
I know. I was sitting across the table from you. Man, those
beers are
smoke
good.
burrs were fantastic. I mean, just
Man,
they had 7 of them on tap, and it was like, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good. Yeah, I mean, those guys have got it dialed in.
The only one that wasn't there now was the Martin, but that was to be expected.
Yeah, that's probably the one that's gonna.
Yeah.
Get
Man, those beers are spectacular.
I'm so mad that we had Live Oak for like 3 months here in Houston, and it was just long enough for me to get really addicted to them, and then they yanked them out completely.
Ouch.
They're really damn good. Cool. Well, is it me introducing Chris today, or?
Sure enough, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, unfortunately, the more competent member of leadership couldn't make it tonight, so I guess it's up to me to read tonight's agenda. So even if
You're competent.
So first off, the West Coast Pilsner results are out. Haven just sent out all, heck, I don't know, like 90, 100 yeast pouches, all on handwritten envelopes. And the Oatmeal Stout episode, I think, is going to be airing in a week or two. And likewise, the West Coast Pilsner podcast entries should be ready to be sent in a few weeks. And kind of relating to that, for the Brew Club Experiment series, if you're not aware, on the Discord channel, we've been talking about doing a kind of a group experiment where people are going to take the Nova Lager and the Diamond Lager and compare those. Don't know if I'm allowed to speak on this, but I guess I will, unless someone interrupts me. But we're hoping to get that posted on the upcoming website, where we'll probably be doing a little bit of a knockoff of Marshall's with that giant group experiment. And next week, also on the Discord channel, we're hoping to do the Brew Club Trivia Night for the 3rd time. Just like last time, make sure you log on to Discord. Shit talking on the voice chat, completely optional. And the winner will be getting themselves a Lalamond East. And after that, yeah, and next month, we're going to have Brian Perky back on to talk about how that group experiment is going and everybody's impressions of using Nova Lager, and then also giving a presentation on dry lager yeast in general. So that'll be pretty exciting. And speaking of guests, we've got Chris Colby. I think he used to journal about both beer and wine, but I guess maybe that wine knowledge has now been replaced by poisonous plant knowledge. So
Yes.
Welcome.
Should I go?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me. I always love talking to homebrewers, especially when I'm not talking to them about fucking hard seltzer. I'm gonna start tonight with talking about reiterated mashing, and then I can go into the other topics that you guys are interested. But I think
Sounds
there's
awesome.
a lot to go in reiterated mashing, and I don't have like a PowerPoint for this, but if you're interested afterwards, you can email me and I'll send you the notes that I have. This covers everything I'm going to say tonight, and there's some extraneous details thrown in there.
Awesome.
And so my email is Colby Brew, COLBYBREW, all lowercase, at mac.com, MAC.com. And I'm also on Beer and Gardening Journal. There's a whole series on this, what I'm going to say, but this is a newer, sort of updated version of that. Okay, so the basic idea behind reiterated mashing is to make a very high gravity but low color wort, and make that at a high extract efficiency. Like, don't waste any grain. And the beer you make from this, it can be at least 9.5% ABV, which is strong, but not, you've had stronger beers, but at least that, but very light colored, like a Pilsner. Like, if you hand it to someone, there's no way they're going to guess that it's a 9.5, or more. You can get up to like 14% depending on what you do. But very light colored beer, but also very, very strong. And you do this by mashing twice, sequentially, actually. The first mash, you mix crushed malted grains and hot water like you always do, and you run off some wort, and this is actually your brewing liquor for your main mash. Okay, so and the brewing liquor includes the strike water, that you use to mash in with, and your water for sparging. So essentially, the second mash forward, you're making beer like you normally do, except you've replaced water with wort. Okay, and in the second mash, you mix your crushed malted grains with the wort from the first mash, and so at least theoretically, you can get up to double the gravity that you normally would if you use the same procedure. Spoiler alert, you can't, but you can get pretty close. The laws of physics and chemistry conspire against you at some point, but you can get pretty close. Okay, and an excellent question to ask at this point is, why the hell would I go through all that? Because it's a long brew day. It's a long, brutal brew day. And so there's only two reasons you would ever really want to do this. If you want to make something that's high in gravity, low in color, and have a good extract efficiency, all three of those things together, this is something you should do. The second is just like, if you just like a challenge. If you've been brewing for a while and you're like, I'm tired of making, the next iteration of hazy IPA or whatever, or, and I want to try something new, this is a good thing to try. Okay, before we get into how exactly this works, I just want to review how to make a big beer, because there's multiple ways you can make a big, strong beer. The first, sort of, you might say the classic, is you mash some grains, you collect a bunch of wort, and then you boil that down. Okay, and that works well. People have done it for years. But the wort does, in an extended boil, the wort does start to pick up color. even if you use very light colored grains to start with, an extended boil, over 2 or 3 hours, you start to pick up some color. And that's not a problem if you don't care. But if you, for whatever weird reason, like light colored beers, then going that route is not what you want to do. The simplest option would be, mash some grains and collect enough wort for, a 60 to 90 minute boil, and then boil it down, and then at the end dump in some malt extract. Okay, this works well. Malt extract boosts your gravity, but it also adds color, and your wort, the resulting wort, is less fermentable. Okay, extract wort is always darker than all grain wort for the same specific gravity. If you make a Pilsner from just Pilsner malt and a Pilsner from Pilsner malt extract, the malt extract is going to be noticeably darker because they've concentrated, the wort, they've already boiled it once, and then you make a beer and you boil it again. And it's also, extract wort is always less fermentable than all grain wort. And when you're talking about a big beer already, you're going to want it to ferment down to a reasonable level, so it's not just, like sickeningly sweet. So that option works, but you know what the result is going to be. Okay, a third option hits sort of 2 of the 3 goals of reiterated mashing, and that's just take like a metric shit ton of grain, put it in your mash tun, and run off just the first wort. Don't sparge, only the first wort, and then boil that down. And there you can make a very, very high gravity beer, very low color. But the only thing you've done is you've done this at the expense of your extract efficiency. You've left a bunch of grain behind in the grain bed. And of course you can do some sort of party guile-esque thing where you refresh the mash with some new grains and make a second beer. But fundamentally you're at a low, with just that first beer, you're at a low extract efficiency. So in reiterated mashing, another way to think about this is you concentrate the wort in the mash tun and not the kettle. Instead of boiling the volume down, you mix wort and water together, or wort and mashed grains together, and have that become your wort. So, in order to succeed, you need to start obviously with light ingredients. You wouldn't want to add a pound of Crystal 60 to a recipe you're doing this way, because you're just defeating the entire purpose. And the second reason that it works is there's just less heat, less boil time. So and that results in less color pickup. So I just want to walk through what a typical if there is such a thing, but a typical reiterated mash brew day would be like. Okay, in the first mash, your goal is to generate your brewing liquor, both your strike water and your sparge water, for the second mash. And so that's your goal, but you also want to minimize the time you spend at this step. Okay, normally your strike water is, so you just take your hose and fill your HLT and add the minerals or whatever. But here you've essentially got part of a brewing process to do your first, just to make your brewing liquor. So you want to minimize the time expended. And how you do this is you start with a high temperature single infusion mash. Although, high temperature mashes lead to less fermentable wort, you've got the whole second mash coming, so don't worry about that. High temperature single infusion mash, use the iodine test. After about 5 minutes, test your wort and see has it converted yet? If you're using high diastatic malts like any North American malt, 5 minutes is all it takes for conversion. And so do the test every 5 minutes, and even if it looks like it's starting to do that, okay, that's fine. That's the end of your first mash. So you can mash out or not as an option. You can recirculate a little bit, but essentially you're wasting time. Because you're gonna you've got the whole second mash to deal with stuff like that. And then just sparge and collect your wort as quickly as possible. I mean, part of reiterated mashing is getting a high extract efficiency. And normally, they tell you sparge slowly to do that, over 90 minutes or something like that. But here's the thing: if you're doing normal wort collection, where you're sparging and collecting wort from the bottom as you add sparge water to the top, speeding that up a little bit, it does lower your extract efficiency a bit, but not an insane amount. And it just sort of comes down to how much you've got an already long brew day. How much time are you willing to spend out eke out a couple extra gravity points? Okay, so your yield after the first mat for a 5-gallon batch, you should yield about 6.5 to 7 gallons of wort at a specific gravity of around 1040. If you sparged the grain bed to completion, that's roughly the specific gravity you should be at. And you should, depending on whether you mashed out or not, you should either be at if you mash out, you don't want to go all the way to 170. You want to go to about 160 if you do at most, just because you're using that wort in the next step as your strike water, and you don't want it to be too hot. So it's either at around 160 or around 150, sort of in the ballpark of that, which is a normal a single infusion mash temperature. And so you get the 6.5 to 7 gallons is going to be enough brewing liquor that it's your batch size, plus the amount of liquid that's absorbed by the grains, plus the amount you can expect to boil away in a 60 to 90 minute boil. So, ending up with 5 gallons of wort. Okay, so now you've got your brewing liquor prepared. Time for the second mash. Okay, one thing you need to clean out your mash tun in between that, but don't worry about scrubbing it with any sort of cleaner and getting it all spotlessly clean. You used it literally a couple minutes ago. Just hose it out, dump out all the major stuff, and get going. Okay, so your goal in the second mash is you want to maximize your extract efficiency and get at a very high gravity wort out of the deal. And the chemistry and the physics working against you is that you've got the crushed grains and you're trying to extract starch from them, and then that's going to get chewed up by the enzymes. But given that you're mashing with wort and not water, the wort you have in your mash tun is at a high concentration, so it slows the extraction rate of the carbohydrates from your grains. And the solution to this is just time. You just have to do a longer mash. So for your second mash in a reiterated brew day, mash it a little bit more thinly. You'll use more strike water, but a little less sparge water. Mash it thinly, just enough that you can stir really nicely. You want to start with a relatively low mash temp. If you did sparge or did mash out to about 160, that'll take you to about 150, or let it drop to about 148, and that's a good single infusion mash temperature. But if you didn't, and your wort is at 150, that means you'll mash in at about 140, and that's actually great. That's at the peak of beta amylase activity, and you're going to want to dry out the wort as much as you can, and so it's good to start there. Let it go for about an hour at 140, and then start heating it at a rate of about 2 degrees Fahrenheit per every 5 minutes, something like that. It's slow. It's a reasonably slow ramp. Stir it until it gets to 152. Okay, and then let it mash for another hour. Okay, so now here's the thing about reiterated mashing. Now you're starting the real part of the brew day. You're into the long slog. What you need to do is at that point recirculate a little bit, not a ton, and just take a sample and take the specific gravity of it. Okay, it really helps if you have a refractometer, because you don't want to, if you're taking uh, hydrometer readings, you've got to take a relatively large volume of liquid and either add that back or dispose of it. But refractometer really helps. So take a refractometer reading, then let the mash go another 10 minutes and take another. You'll see that it's climbed a little bit. Okay, normally on a normal mash with just water and mash grains, that stops after a very short amount of time. I'm not sure exactly, but you level out. But in reiterated mashing, it's slow. It's very slow. and what happens is eventually hypothetically you'd want to wait until the reading is the same, like you've extracted all you can from the grains. But what happens is you get bored. You spend 3 or 4 hours mashing and you're like, you know what, fuck this. I'm done. And that's fine, because it's just like, but by that time you will be close to your sort of maximum that you can get, and you just have to decide how much of a perfectionist you want to be. Like if I had a mash tun that had like a heating loop, I would set it out and just let it go like overnight or something. That would be a good idea, but I don't have that. So anyway, you sample, you'll see the specific gravity climb every time you sample it, and you just have to decide when the rate of the climb is such that you're not interested in pursuing that anymore. Okay, and then at this point, you're basically just gonna brew like you normally do. You want to recirculate, get some clarity in the wort. Then you sparge with your remaining brewing liquor, from the first mash. And when you're done with that, let that completely drain all the way through. Don't leave wort that you made behind in your mash tun, and just let that go all the way through. And at this point, what you should have is, if you're making a 5-gallon batch, you should have a yield of about 6 to 6.5 gallons of pre-boil wort. And depending on how long you spent in the second mash, the specific gravity can be up to 1080. Okay, and 1080 I realize isn't like astoundingly high, but this is before the boil, and this is also, you haven't used malt extract, you haven't done any of that. So if you did 6.5, or if you collected 6.5 gallons, and it's somewhere close to 1080, that's going to boil down to 1.104, and that's going to ferment down to about a 10% ABV beer. If you've got 6 gallons at sort of closing in on 1080, that's going to boil down to 5 gallons at a specific gravity of 1.096, which will ferment down to a 9.5% ABV beer. Okay, so both of those are, not the highest gravity beer ever, but then again, 9.5 and 10 isn't, it's nothing to sneeze at. And then also, if you look at these, if you've brewed them well, they're like straw colored. It's like a Pilsner, but it's very, very strong. And I skipped one thing. In the first mash, you should add enough calcium like you would ordinarily do in for any beer, just of course. In the second mash, add that same amount of calcium again to your water, because whatever calcium drove the pH down in the first mash, that's gone now, and you still need the pH to be in a reasonable range there. Although, it's a little flaky because your wort is is going to be at the pH it's going to be at, but you want to add a little calcium because A, adding a little more is not going to hurt anything, and B, you don't want the pH to climb up in the absence of having the calcium. So that, in a nutshell, is reiterated mashing. And if you're wondering about, well, are there options to it? Are there different? Yeah, there's oodles of ways that you can take this and change it. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, if you just collect the first wort from a mash and boil it down, that already leads to high gravity, low color at the expense of extract efficiency. But you can double that up. You can do 2 mashes of only first wort, and then you'd have even higher, an even higher specific gravity, but still the same color essentially, or very close to it, and all you sacrificed is some grain. And at a homebrew scale, if you're just being adventurous or whatever, yeah, you've undersparged a grain bed or two, so it's not going to be a big deal. Another option you can do is at the end of your second mash, you can sparge a little more with water. When you're done, the wort at the second mash is going to come off at a fairly high. It's going to be around 1080, and so everything stuck in the mash tun after you sparge with the wort is going to be pretty high gravity, and you can sparge at least a little, get some of that out, and you boost your extract efficiency at the expense of diluting the wort just a bit. Another option you can do is a shorter boil. I mean, if you're trying to absolutely minimize your color, you can say, I'm not going to get the highest gravity ever, but I can do a 30-minute boil. Throw in some high gravity hops, and it'll be fine. And I'll pick up the least amount of color that's reasonable. You can also take a page from Belgian brewing, especially the brewers who make triples, and add a little sugar. Okay, just sucrose. Okay, because that's not going to add any color to your wort, and just throw that in the last 5 minutes of the boil, and you boost the gravity without boosting the color or whatever. And then you have some options that aren't as good. One, of course, is adding malt extract at the end, which that does add gravity, but you're also adding color, which you've worked not to add. And probably the worst option of all would be to then go ahead and do a longer boil, because that's just, unless you're like a masochist, why are you extending your mash and your boil? That makes no sense. But I mean, you could do it. It's an option. Okay, so if you ever try reiterated mashing, one thing I should do is set your expectations. And that's the first time you try it, your brew session is going to be an absolute fiasco. Like, think about the first time you tried just an ordinary single infusion mash. If you're anything like me, it was like a comedy of errors, because you're going through it the first time, and there's all these things to keep track of. And so it's just like exponentially worse with reiterated mashing. So if you do try it, don't get overly hung up on hitting every temperature, hitting every volume, all that. Just sort of use some sense. You know it's going to be a long brew day, and know that you can, if you're low on volume, you can just add some water. That's working against the high gravity part, but who cares? And if you're high on gravity, you can just boil a little longer, and that's, of course, that's working against your goals. But again, so what? If you take really good notes, though, by your second brew day, you can have it. You've gone from just being in the ballpark to like being in the infield, and then you can start refining it from there. I have done one brew day where I went one more turn of the crank, went for a third. I took the super concentrated wort and used that as my brewing liquor for the next one, and that was, just don't do that. What I would say, it's like, I mean, I did get higher gravity wort, and it was nice and low in color, but that was a long day, and it was not optimal. There was a lot easier ways to do that, or well, there wasn't, but it wasn't really worth it, I would think. Okay, so again, if you want to email me about the about reiterated mashing, colbybrew@mac.com. And also there's a write-up on Beer and Gardening Journal. One or both of those things should give you any more information. And I don't know, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Are you able to see the meeting chat in case people do? Otherwise, I could just read them off.
It must be around here on the bottom.
For me, it's in the bottom middle near the hang up, conveniently.
Show conversation, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I can see it, yeah. Okay, let's see.
I think you just had one question about reiterated mash at the bottom, though.
How much grain is being used in each mash? In the first mash, you want to generate 6 to 6.5 gallons of, is that right? Yeah, no, more like 6.5 to whatever amount you want it. So you add that much grain so that when you fully sparge it, you end up with that volume. For me, it's and this probably varies a little bit for everybody, but for me, if I fully sparge a grain bed, I collect about 0.65 gallons per every pound of grain I have. So if I have 10 pounds of grain, I get 6.5 gallons of wort at 1040, and I've sparged everything out of it before getting all the silicates and the tannins and all that. So that's how much you use in the first, and then in the second, it's pretty much the same amount, but it's just you're using wort to mash with instead of water.
So you're getting a lighter color using this method. Are you getting a flavor impact as well?
Not really.
I realize they're already such pale beers are to begin with, but
yeah, there's not like a couple of the first times I did it, I was thinking, well, I'm not only doubling up on the carbohydrates, but I'm doubling up on the tannins, I'm doubling up on the proteins, and I was sort of worried that, but none of that really materialized. The beer comes out, really it's at like every high gravity beer, the quality of your fermentation is going to determine that the end result, and of course the quality of your ingredients and stuff too. But
right.
Yeah, I haven't noticed any weird off flavors or off characteristics associated with this method. It yields clear beer. If you let it chill as you normally do, and let chill haze if there's any drop out, and if you find the beer, I basically just use Irish moss in the kettle, and that's all you need, or it's all I need. Other people use less Irish moss or Whirlflock or whatever, and then they'll do
fish bladder,
an additional finding in the fermenter and whatever works. But yeah, I haven't really noticed any weird flavors associated with it. Reiterated mashing.
Yeah. Looks like you got a question from Will.
Yeah, if I was brewing an imperial stout with this method, blah blah blah. I wouldn't brew an imperial stout with this method. That's just there's no reason for that. Yeah, I would go with. Let me see if I can read the whole question. How would you split your grain bill base malts? Blah blah blah. Well, if I was doing it, I would probably add all the colored, the dark roasted malts and the crystal malts and stuff in the second mash. But like I said, this is too much work for just that. And for an imperial stout, you wouldn't be accomplishing anything by doing a reiterated mash. I'm trying to think if there would even be a single benefit to doing that.
Well, you could turn a brown ale into a light brown ale.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I would just choose a different method for this. This is like for brewing like a big, either like a Pilsner or a golden ale or something like that.
Yeah. Are there styles that you tend to exclusively brew using reiterated mashing? Like Belgian triple makes a lot of sense, but wasn't sure about others.
I've just sort of brewed. I've always just brewed sort of a beer based on the method, not shooting for any style. So just I've either brewed it with like all Pilsner malt in both mashes, like no specialty grains, or I've brewed it with all Pilsner malt in the second mash, but in the first, like maybe 40% flaked maize or something like that. So it makes super light. Super light. And also when I was worried about protein content, I was convinced that maybe the first mash should have some corn in it to lower the protein content. But yeah, so I really when I use the method, which is very, very infrequently because it's a very, very long brew day, it's just the lightest colored malts I can get. The light colored adjuncts if I use adjuncts. And one thing I haven't done is done the triple thing and just added sugar at the end. I mean that's smart, but
Makes a lot of sense.
There's also trying to run a good fermentation, and I like to run a really ordered, solid fermentation. So
yeah, is this a way for somebody to save on mash tun space then? I think somebody kind of had a comment about that.
Oh yeah, that would be a bit. Yeah, if your mash tun space was limited, I guess doing it this way would be something. Hey, can you give me 1 minute? I need to run to the restroom.
Sounds good.
I'm at that age where when you gotta go, you gotta go.
Jeepers, 25% beer, Frank.
Yeah.
25%, that's crazy.
Me and a friend were like, how much alcohol can we make? Let's try this. And we even had to add honey because he wasn't kidding when he said it ruins your efficiency. I think
Oh yeah.
at the time I was getting like 80%, 79ish, but when I did this I got like 50, 60%. It was
Oh wow.
So we had like a pound of honey. I mean, it was a lot of honey.
Yeah.
And
What type of beer
was
was
also
it?
wasn't kidding. It finished at 6 points, 9 points.
Really?
Yeah, it was a harsh beer.
Yeah, that's how long did that take? Like a whole month?
3 weeks, yeah.
Oh wow. That's not bad at all.
Jersey and Tim reviewed it, and they basically just like, oh, that's a lot of alcohol.
Tastes like vodka.
Yeah. It's better now though. It's like 4 years old now, so it's pretty good now.
I understand why you didn't go through all of it yet. That would be an experience.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of work.
Oh yeah. It was a long brew day. It was like because we didn't even think about doing the, like you said, the 5-10 minutes for the first iteration, and then we did like an hour both iterations. So it was a long fucking day.
Yeah, that was the first time I tried it. I did that. It's like, I'll mash for an
well,
hour,
that
and then
makes
I'll mash
sense.
for another hour.
Well, that makes sense because the whole purpose of the longer mash is to get smaller chain sugars. So the first mash, just get the sugars into the wort. Next mash, you break it down.
Right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. What you got there now, Chris?
Oh, just live oak.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jealous.
Yeah, I haven't brewed in a while. I'm gonna make a German Hefeweizen soon. Like, I'm not sure how soon, but soon, and that'll be the first beer I brewed in like a substantial amount of time. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take half of the wort and just make it just a plain old German Hefeweizen. But then I'm gonna divert about half of it and add raspberries. Like way back in the day, like a raspberry wheat beers were a thing, and I liked them, So
yeah, you don't see fruit beers as much, weirdly enough.
No, unless they're the exploding sour kinds.
Right,
Yeah,
but not a lot of like raspberry wheat type things.
Yeah,
For
I mean, and
the-
they used to be more popular.
Exploding fruit lactose hazies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
I like
raspberry
hazies.
wheats used
I'm
to be the
drinking one
thing
right now,
ruining the
but
beer industry.
I'm not a fruit beer person.
The
Yeah.
plus point about a hazy beer exploding is you don't have to drink the rest of the crap. I'm just there's like, well, I've got to admit there's one or two hazy IPAs I like, but for the most part I'm just like, oh, are you kidding me? No.
Yeah. It's not a terribly easy style to get right.
Yeah.
I would say it's a fundamentally bad style, and if you get it right, you've done so by some weird
See,
quirk.
I like hazies, but I don't like. I remember brute IPAs. That was the same argument I made for brute IPAs. It was like I found one I liked. It was just like, the rest are not great.
Yeah, gypsum is your friend when brewing an IPA.
Brute.
If you get a lot of calcium sulfate into the mash, that's generally going to help you to a point. It's going to help make the hops better, the hop expression. That was a problem with me for a long time. I'd brew beers and just pour in the hops, and it was like, yeah, it's bitter and it just doesn't have, I would taste like a Stone IPA or a Racer 5 or a what was the Dogfish Head 60 Minute or something, and I was just like, there's something about these that I'm not getting in my homebrews, and
That makes it pop.
I
Yeah.
finally read some homebrewers who are doing very well at IPAs, and we're like, yeah, add gypsum. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I think hazies are starting to use more gypsum too lately. But
there's one who makes electric jellyfish. That one I'm not so terribly.
yeah, I'm not sure who that is.
Pine House.
Pine House, that's right. It's an Austin brewery.
Oh.
How's your beer for basic brewing going?
How's the what?
How's your beer for basic brewing?
I haven't even started it. I'm gonna start it soon. I was just telling these guys,
Still
I'm making a wheat and a raspberry wheat. Yeah, James is always. We've done a series of like recipe formulation shows with him. Like, what would you put in this? And he's like, I'm gonna brew this. And then like next week, he's like, it's in the fermenter. Like, how has yours progressed? And I'm like, planning. Very definitely approaching this, slowly,
Very
getting all my ducks in a
diligently.
row. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard those interviews.
I'm sure he's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, get it in gear, dude.
So, Chris, are you planning on growing anything in the garden that you would be using in beers?
Not this year, unfortunately. In the past I grew hops, and then we had a huge what do you call it? Dry
drought.
season and drought, in 2011, and that killed them off. I grew barley in my garden one year. I took the whole garden and made barley, but unfortunately I didn't. When I got to that point, I had no plan to thresh it, and so threshing it was just this comedy of errors, and I eventually just got to the point where I got like this tiny amount of barley out of it, and I sort of malted that. Well, not sort of. I malted it, and it was like one handful of malt in a otherwise batch full of. So yeah, I'd like to brew, or I'd like to grow barley again, and but first find some method of threshing that I could do that would work because just sort of I was just trying to like take the stalks and just basically beat them against the side of a bucket, thinking that the grain would all fall in and the chaff would stay behind, but that was going nowhere quickly.
Yeah, what kind of variety did you have to use to grow barley in Texas?
I grew robust barley. It was it's a 6-row kind.
Okay.
And another year I grew like a little bit more for decoration. What was it? I grew some sort of 2-row variety.
Yeah.
The thing about growing barley in your own, like I know a lot of homebrewers have like this dislike of 6-row barley because it's typically goes in American Pilsners and it's malted to go in American Pilsners.
Right.
And you've probably read like, oh, the kernels are smaller or whatever. But if you grow it in your garden, you can grow. You can get kernels every bit as plump as a 2-row.
You just have to space them more.
The two, just density and then fertilization and and stuff like that. And then of course you can malt it to be a Vienna malt if you wanted. It just never gets malted like that way in the United States, and it's higher protein, so you've got some in the malting. You have some opportunities there to develop more Maillard products and stuff like that. And I mean, I didn't. I just made a pale malt with mine, but I was thinking about.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
yeah.
And also just, I mean, if someone was thinking about growing barley in there, I would find a variety that grows well where you are. Start there. Don't worry about this being the best brewing variety ever, because you can plant that, but if it doesn't grow in your area, then you just wasted your time.
Have you tried growing those Neo Mexicanos hops?
No, I haven't. Those are interesting.
Really, I had really tough luck growing them in regular varieties in Texas, but those ones really like the latitude that we're at and the heat and everything.
When I was growing, I grew a bunch of different things. I had like Cascade, Centennial, Galena, and then I had a bunch of the sort of English and German noble hops and stuff like that. And the Cascades grew amazingly. Cascades and Centennial and Galena were all really like great, robust plants. The European like hoity-toity hops just sort of like did not deal with Texas. And then I was trying to figure out, even though they grew well, they turned out really grassy. And apparently that's a thing that hops do when they're grown at high temperature.
Oh.
And one thing I was trying to do is, because you can cut back hops during the growing season, and they'll delay their
I've done that myself.
I was thinking of, can I cut back hops late enough in the Texas growing season that it's like September or October or even early November that they finally start producing cones. And before I got to test that's the year that all my plants died.
Well, I can say firsthand it at least seems to work pretty well, because I tend to cut mine back for 2 or 3 months here before letting them go crazy, and
nice.
Harvesting when it actually gets cool.
When do you harvest?
Like November or so, if I can help it.
Wow, nice.
It's still pretty hot, but it's at least it's not like September.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that works, because I always wondered about that.
Yeah, they're pretty weird though, those varieties. But looks like we have a hand raised from Daniel.
Yeah, I just bought a new stainless steel mash tun, and I just planned on cleaning it with PBW and going on with my brewing. And then last week we got an email from More Beer newsletter saying how important pacifying stainless steel is, and went on and on and on. I thought we're past that and we're not doing that anymore. Did some searching and couldn't find really much in the last 8 years. Everybody said it's not really necessary. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I've never bothered to do that. I don't know if I'm suffering some horrible consequences. I don't know what they are. Okay. Did John Palmer write that? Because he's a metallurgist and he's.
I was going to look it up. I was trying to find it and I couldn't find the email. I think I deleted it, and I'm trying to go through the trash and trying to find where it was. But I don't know who the author was or how much. I knew from last time that you're a scientist, so I was asking your more scientist opinion on it.
Yeah, my scientific opinion is I know absolutely dick about metallurgy. Yeah, not my field. Yeah, if I have a question about that, I'll call like John Palmer, or Colin Kaminsky, or somebody.
But were you a chemist though?
I was a chemist, mostly biology. My PhD is in
okay.
biology. My undergraduate degrees I've got chemistry and biology.
Oh,
A little
okay.
different.
I worked as a chemist for a while, but
Well, looking like we're getting some comments about that, though. Maybe from people who know something.
yeah, I'd like to learn more. I mean, I just have never bothered to do it.
One response I heard, which kind of makes sense, was professionals do it, or professional brewers do it because they use more caustic or more stronger chemicals with their stainless steel than we do in the homebrew, and so that's why they do it, but we really don't need it on our end.
That could be, yeah. I mean, because professional brewers they'll have their CIP operations clean in place, and they'll, their cleaning is essentially just they have pumps pumping cleaning fluid into the vessel, and there's like a spray ball. Well, at least one way of doing it is there's a spray ball in the middle of the vessel, and it just sprays all the sides, and they recirculate that through. And yeah, homebrewers don't have that intensity of, we're not pumping that much caustic liquids through our. So yeah, maybe we're just not bothering our stainless steel to the point where we need to passivate it. But yeah, I don't know. That's just a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always just used Barkeeper's Friend like before I've done anything with any kind of stainless, just to kind of give it like a once over, just to make sure things are clean, and then PBW after that, and then kind of consider that quote unquote passivated, and never any issues from there. More or less for my own sanity more than anything else.
That's what the article said, was to use Barkeeper's Friend, and then maybe maybe if it has a lot of oil, start with like a normal dish detergent just to get rid of the oils for the only time you really want to do that, and then use Barkeeper's Friend, and then that was pretty much it. It didn't say PBW after that.
Yeah, it's more like for a peace of mind than
add,
anything. Yeah.
Definitely first wash, do a degreaser. I mean, out of the machine shop, you're gonna have a lot of oils, cutting oils, a lot of cleaning oils, a lot of everything. So you just clean it with some degreaser first, and then think about.
Just have your first brew wash all that crap out.
Yeah.
Your beer is like this tastes like machine oil. Yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah, you don't need.
One thing I say about Barkeeper's Friend is something I heard around a lot, and then I realized it's like $3 at Home Depot, so it's more than you're probably going to use in your life.
And they actually
it's cheap
now.
and it's good.
You get it pre-mixed, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually there. They had the liquid and they had the powder, and I didn't know what to get, and they were cheap enough. I just grabbed one of each, and they both.
It's the way to go.
Same story here, yeah.
Does Home Depot literally call it Barkeeper's Friend?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or they call something
Yeah,
else?
that's the brand name.
That's the brand name, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you don't need a very strong acid to passivate either, and I'm 90% sure Barkeeper's Friend is an acid.
I always assumed Star Sand did that for me, to be honest. I don't know.
We had so many acids, including the beer itself, in the brewing process, so
Right.
I think we're okay. I might eat my words, though. If somebody in the brew club says they die of rust poisoning later this week.
How often do you use Barkeeper's Friend? Like every batch, or
Nah.
every 5 batches, 10 batches?
I'll use it if I see a lot
ugly.
of scale or something. It's really
Once
good. It's
every
really good for
few
removing scale.
years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do like once a year, just kind of keep up from all my cleaning.
God, in Bastrop, like you can get scale on something. Like you can have a nice clean glass and just pour a glass of water, and then you drink it, and it's like it's like what is in this water?
Yeah, we have real hard water here in Florida, so it's a lot of that.
So do I in Southern California. It's real chunky.
Chunky style water.
Yeah, here Austin's not the best water either.
Yeah,
No.
no, it's like filtered through like a billion feet of limestone or something because it's just carbonate central. It's great for more stouts and porters though.
Yeah.
Do you buy your water?
I do. I'll look up the latest mineral content in the municipal water, and I'll calculate like how much distilled water do I need to bring that down, the carbonates down to under 50 parts per million, at least if I'm bringing up pale beer. And then so I just dilute everything with distilled water, and then add whatever calcium back that I want.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense that you don't get to brew all the time if you have to physically go buy water to start a brew day.
Well, I haven't been brewing much lately. It's not really anything about that. It's just been a bum hanging around, and I mean I've been gardening and stuff and but it's just been like, I mean I brewed since 1990, and I had a lot of years where I was brewing like a lot, like insane amounts, and now I'm just sort of like, well, I've done that, and I just want to, I want to, like, when I want to brew something and have it turn out well, and then I don't want to think like the next 2 weeks from then I'm like, oh, I gotta brew again.
Yeah. Is there anything in your garden currently that you're thinking about incorporating into the kitchen or brewing?
Not really. I'm growing for the first time ever a Tropa belladonna, deadly nightshade. So
Okay.
no on that. I'm also
It's
brewing.
It's not like nettles where you can just boil it to get rid of the poison.
No. And I'm growing monk's hood, or aconite, which is like, it's not only poisonous, but it's a contact hazard. Like if you touch it, your hands will go numb. And I'm like, wow, I'm excited for this. I'm not gonna touch it, but I'm gonna make sure all the goddamn animals can't get to it, and including little kids. But there's no little kids in the neighborhood, so.
Yeah, just the name of it sounds like something a wizard would use to curse his enemies. So.
Yeah, it actually shows up in, there's a Canadian horror movie called Ginger Snaps, which is a really good movie, and it shows up in there. It's an anti lycanthropy drug or whatever.
Maybe an anti-everything, but
yeah, it's nasty, but fucking beautiful flowers. I mean, so, and I somehow got in the habit of growing poisonous plants, so I'm branching out in that respect.
Do you have a squirrel problem that you're trying to permanently deal with?
Oh, I've got squirrels all over, and they dig through my garden constantly. I should be dealing with my wrist rocket, but I don't know. I just I let them, whatever, and I just come and fix it afterwards.
Yeah.
I got a question about pH. At what points do you measure pH?
I measure pH pretty much throughout the brewing process. I'll mash in, let the mash go for about 5 minutes, recirculate a little bit, and drop some mash, and then you hope that after it takes a little while for the mash pH to drop to the proper point, but after like 5 minutes you should be pretty close to where you're fine. So I do it in the mash, as I do continuous sparging. I do it near the end of the sparge, just the final runnings. I just sort of keep a pH meter going, and I'll watch for, I don't want the pH to climb up above 5.8 near the end of the thing. And then I'll do a post boil sample, because I usually add a little bit of calcium during the boil, and I want the pH to drop from 5.2, 5 whatever, 5 point whatever it was in the mash tun. I want it to drop to 5.0 by the end of the boil. So I'll do a test there. And then I used to take the pH of the finished beer a lot, but these days I found if your wort is 5.0 going into the fermenter, the yeast is going to take care of the rest. I never had a problem with a too high pH if you set it up right in the leading up to fermentation. So those are the points. One thing I don't do is, like, a lot of brewers seem to be hung up on the pH of their sparge water. And here's the thing, it's absolutely fucking irrelevant. Your sparge water, it's water, it has no buffering value whatsoever. Even the worst municipal water is basically completely unbuffered. So whatever the pH is, it's not going to matter, because the second it hits your grain bed, it's going to be the pH of your grain bed. So there's really, and I've read, books on homebrewers who, are otherwise, fairly intelligent and well regarded, and they go on and on about, adding acid to your sparge water, and I'm just like, your local college probably has an introductory chemistry course, and you can learn about acids, bases, and buffers. Or go to your local library. It's a fine place with many, many books. You'll learn ever so much. Yeah. So yeah, I take the pH of wort, and I take the pH of post boil wort, and that's mainly where I do. And you can take the pH of beer, and it's, especially if something just seems off, if the beer doesn't have, the Germans have a word for it. It's like zing. It's not, but it's whatever the German word for zing is. If it just sort of feels lifeless, then maybe take the pH and see if something's gone astray. Because if it climbs too high, the beer just doesn't seem to have a crispness to it. And then if it climbs way too high, you can even get into like a soapy. But I mean, I think you have to screw up pretty badly to get it to that level. But yeah, pH meter, and pH meters are great these days. Oh my God. When I was in chemistry class, we had these pH meters, and we'd have to go through all this rigmarole of, they'd have to, the thing would have to sit in the right buffer, and then you'd have to clean it extensively every time, and then you'd have to, you'd have to calibrate it, go through this huge calibration thing that would work for about 2 minutes, and then you'd have to calibrate it again. And these days it's just like bloop, and it tells you the pH, and you just sort of half-ass rinse it off, and it's fine. Yeah, and they're cheap too. pH meters are cheaper than, I don't know, dirt these days. They're a great brewing tool.
Yeah, that's good to know. I've been kind of staying away from them just because of remembering how awful they were. I don't know, even 15 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do the 2-point calibration, and with the old, I remember I was using them. I'm old enough that they had the meters and the needles, and not the digital readout like fancy pants brewers these days. The good old analog. Yeah.
Are you trying to get your pH for your dark and light beers, pale beers, to all be 5.0 at post boil?
That's a good question. Pale beers definitely. Dark beers can drop a little bit below that. Although it's weird. I mean, dark grains themselves are more acidic than pale grains, and that tends to drive the pH down. But if you let it go too low, the beers are lifeless, or at least the expression of the dark malts isn't good. So I mean, I try to keep the pH intact, or in check in the mash, by keeping enough, when I brew a dark beer, enough carbonates in the mash to keep it to 5.2 in the mash, or 5.2 to 5.6, and then 5.0 at the end of the boil, and then from there, whatever happens in the fermentation, I'm usually happy with.
Have you ever
adjusted? I mean, I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. What was the question?
Oh, do you ever adjust your pH late in the process, or?
It usually doesn't happen. I mean, if there's an emergency, if something went and I'm just like way off, then yeah, I would go with some phosphoric acid or something. But generally, just getting your water chemistry right during the mash is going to help everything. Throwing a little bit of calcium in during the boil, like another 50 parts per million. You know, I can't even think of a time when that didn't,
Right.
you know, give me the results that I
Something
wanted.
else would be going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I did have once where I went, there's a homebrew store that's no longer here in Austin, and I bought, I forget what, some chemical for treating the, you know, your mash liquor or whatever. And I brewed a batch of beer with it, and it was terrible. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I finally found out that the thing that I bought, which I thought was phosphoric acid, was actually like pH 7 buffer. They had just mislabeled it, you know, because they bought it in bulk and then broke it down into smaller things. And I went through all my brewing chemicals, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I smelled it, and it's like, that's not phosphoric acid. And then I took the pH of it, and it was pH 7. And I was like, I know what this is.
Oof, that's rough.
Yeah, it's like a whole day ruined because, yeah. But
And not only that, you don't have phosphoric acid.
I relate. I had a buddy off Amazon. He bought like a gallon of like 90% phosphoric acid. Like it was like maybe a gallon and a half. Like it was at a good price. He was like giving it out. So one of the guys in the brew club, took his 10% phosphoric bottle over there and got it refilled, and then a brewer day later he added it as if it was 10%. I think he was hoping that, well, maybe it'd be a good experiment. He could bring it to it. But I think it just didn't even ferment. It was, his gravity was just terrible, and it didn't ferment, and it was so don't add like several milliliters of 90% phosphoric acid to you.
Big takeaway.
That's funny. I do remember from way back in the day the story of and I don't know if this is apocryphal or, I mean, enough people homebrewed it probably happened, but the story of somebody making a 5-gallon batch of beer, and it comes bottling time, and they look on the thing, and they, 3/4 cups of sugar, but for some reason they had 3/4 cups of salt to their beer, and then of course they got flat salty beer out of it. And anyway, a good story. I don't know if it's true or not, but a good story.
It's funny. Well, how long are we keeping you here? Just noticed it was a little after 8, so I don't know if you had anything planned.
God, no, I'm boring.
I used to, we're all here too.
In graduate school, like, I remember in graduate school, like 10 or 11 at night was still a perfectly good time for someone to call me up and say, hey, you want to go out? Yeah. And nowadays it's like 9 o'clock rolls around, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to bed. Tired.
Yeah, by asking if you had something later tonight, I guess I meant, do you have a pillow to get to soon?
Yeah. No, I usually, my wife lives in Boston now, and so I'm sort of stuck here dealing with our animal farm. And so I usually talk to her via Skype at 9, but that's a ways off.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard you've got a couple cats there.
Yeah, we made some mistakes. Let's say that. we brought in some pitiful looking outdoor female cats who then crapped out litters full of, and for a while we're a lot better now. We've, cats have an expiration date, and we had a whole bunch of cats that sadly reached that expiration date, and now we're down to a smaller number, but still into the crazy cat person.
But didn't learn your lesson fully.
Yeah. Nowadays I see a cat outside, I'm like, don't you try that, and don't you look at me that way. You are staying outside, you dumb animal.
Do you have any books in the work?
I do. Weirdly enough, I had a book on brewing and science that I pitched to the Brewers Association, and they said, yeah, that sounds good. And then I wrote it for them, And then they paid me the advance, and then they said, you know what, we don't want to publish this. And I was like, oh, wait, what? And they said, well, this wasn't what I expected. And I was like, did you read the extended outline I sent you that told you like pretty much exactly what it was going to be? And it's like, yeah, but it just wasn't what we expected. I was like, so whatever. But then they gave me the rights back to it, so I technically can sell it to somebody else. And also, I'm writing a book on cooking chicken. I'm like, I love grilling and frying and roasting, and so I'm making a chicken cookbook. I tried to pitch that to Page Street, which I published my first 3 books to, and they didn't even respond. So I'm guessing that doesn't interest you.
You could always reach out to the Brewers Association and try to get an advance fee, and then call it good enough.
So you learned actually how to pick a topic of something you actually enjoy. You know, you can go eat chicken instead of drinking seltzers.
Yeah, that would be good. I'm also like I've got like a whole pile of sort of half-assed things that I'm doing. Like a friend of mine from Iceland and I are supposedly writing a horror movie script, and that's going slow, but it's like a good idea. Me and another friend are supposedly writing a book on atheism, but again, that's going slow. And then I had this idea like a couple years ago at my book club. This guy recommended the Wheel of Time series. It's like this sword and sorcery, D&D, Lord of the Ringsy shit like that. And I decided to write something like that, only as a comedy, sort of. And I love Terry Pratchett's book, so
nice.
Obviously heavily influenced by that. But so I have this sort of fantasy novel that I'm working on that's set in sort of something that's basically it's basically Norway, but on a different plane or dimension or whatever. But it's obviously like Norway and Scandinavia, and all sorts of very, very Scandinavian stuff happens, and hopefully to comic effect, but we'll see.
Nice. Are you going to be kind of acknowledging that it's a ripoff of Norway, kind of Terry Pratchett style?
Oh yeah, I mean, I couldn't if the book turns out like it's heading, I couldn't with a straight face ever say, no, Terry Pratchett, never heard of him, never read all of his books twice, Yeah, there's no way. It's obviously a taking from that vein of humor, sort of. And just like I was a Lord of the Rings nut as a kid. I read all the books a couple times, and when I read the Wheel of Time series or whatever, pretty good. And I don't know, there was a series when I was younger. Well, and it still exists. It was like the White Gold Wielder. I don't know if you ever. It was some guy who lived in our world, and he had like diabetes or some shit like that. But then when he went to the other world, he had all these
the one that was hit by a car and
yeah, I don't know. It was crazy, and it was
just had a friend that was illustrating a reboot of one of those old fantasy series where it was like a guy that was kind of pathetic in real life and gets hit by a car, and I guess that sends him to the fantasy realm. It was a little bit odd.
Yeah, those are all sort of the life of Walter Mitty rehashes. Somebody, Harry Potter, someone in our world who isn't that good, but then my book's not like that. My book is entirely just set in fake Norway. But there's what I hope is a funny part of it is that all the Norse gods are alive and kicking around there, and they're, you can meet them if you happen to run into them at the right time, and that sort of stuff. And the idea is one of the ideas is there's like one of the things that's always struck me is like the Bible or the Quran or whatever the Jewish thing is, or whatever any of those things is like they're supposedly written by God, but there's nothing in them that has any scientific value. There's no like, here's the secret of the atom. you know, you don't find any of that stuff. It's just all what ignorant shepherders 6,000 years ago knew, you know, or 2,000 years ago. So whatever, one of the ideas in the novel is that Odin has written this book, and it's in code. There's just wave after wave of new scientific and cultural knowledge, and people gradually work their way through it. Yeah, and they keep asking Odin to like help them like translate it, and he's like, you know, it's meant for you to translate. You do it.
Right.
And,
learn how to use a ruler first.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just like, because one of the things I said, like, that if you're whatever your beliefs are, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm just trying to say, like, in the Bible, you know, God is described as like all seeing, all knowing, and he never does a single smart thing throughout the entire Bible. There's not one thing that you go like, wow, that was really smart. That guy's clever. It's like, no, he just seems like a gigantic, you know, oversized 2,000-year-old sheep herder. You know, that some of the shepherd would go, that guy's awesome. You know, that guy probably with a red, like, Make Israel Great Again hat. Or
we still recording.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's something that's hard to believe. Like right before Christmas, I thought, because I tend to say things that are on my mind even when I shouldn't. I thought I had burned my bridges with two different places that I write for, because I had things transpired and I said some things, and then I wrote them back, you know, just like business as usual. What's up next? Blah blah blah. And I didn't hear from them, and I was like, ah, shit, you know, like. What, there are consequences to my action? That's bullshit.
Can't relate.
And, but then it turns out they wrote me back, and there was no, they knew me, you know.
Thankfully, if you're like that 24/7, people tend to be more forgiving.
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, that's just him doing his shtick.
It's not about you when he made that offhand comment. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. One of my best friends is a Christian missionary, and oh my God, he and I have the best conversations, because he's the same way as I am. Just like, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say, and you know, I'm not gonna accommodate you and your beliefs or whatever. So and then we both like, you know, we're just like, yeah, that's him. That's him. Of course he would say that.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about offending people if you know where both of you stand on things.
I remember at one time when I was working for a brewing magazine that shall remain unnamed, but anyway, we had something, and you know, this was at not the start of when things were getting overly sensitive, but you know, people were sensitive about stuff, and there was one thing that we had that could have been interpreted as being anti-Muslim, and they're like, are we going to offend our Muslim readers? And I was like, this is a brewing magazine. How many Muslim readers do you think we have? Exactly. You know, how are they? Someone is going to have to tell them about this for them to be offended, you know? And it was a stretch to even think that they would be. It wasn't, you know, like anything. But I was like, yeah, Jesus Christ, so to speak.
So to speak.
See you, Will.
It will. All right, guys, I gotta split.
Hey.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for inviting me. I had a great time.
Yeah, don't you guys go to the same brew club?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Austin Zealots.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great club. We got a lot of really good brewers there. We have there's one guy, Mark Shoppy, who they had to change the rules of the National Homebrew Contest because of him.
Uh-oh.
So he's good. We got another guy, Corey Martin, who won the one of those years, the Sam Adams contest.
Yeah, yeah.
So he won that one year, and I think his brother won it another year, or he won some. But
Jeez.
What rules did they have to change?
It used to be you just submitted however many beers you wanted, and he had a job such that he was able to. He mostly worked from home, and he was able to just brew however many beers that he wanted. And he was also in the practice of he would brew a Scottish 80, and then he would dilute some of it into a Scottish 70 and some of it into a 60. And he had all these combinations of beers that were just diluted versions of the others, and he would just submit this pile of beers. And he won Homebrewer of the Year. Well, at least once, maybe the second year was the time that they said, you know what, no. Yeah.
What did they have to limit it to, like 10 or so?
I forget. There's a limit now of how many beers you can submit, and the scoring, like your best beers have to score. You can't
be the entire competition.
You can't just score mediocre on 1,000 beers and win Brewer of the Year. You've got to have some good. And I mean he did have some high scoring beers, but he also just blanketed the competition with his entries.
Yeah, well there is something to be said for Brewer of the Year going for someone who makes a batch basically every 5 days all year.
Yeah.
Even if it's mediocre.
I've been outside his house at a barbecue, but I've never been inside his house. But apparently, his house is just cases of beer stacked everywhere, everywhere. Going back to whatever.
Right. Just to be ready for the next competition, you mean?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Well, did I miss a good presentation?
No.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're gonna have to delete the recording.
Yeah.
There was a lot of wrong information, and he taught us how to mash backwards.
Yeah.
Turning malted grain into unmalted grain, and it's pretty weird.
We'll just reverse the recording and it should be good, right?
Okay, we can work with that. Then we can start with a discussion on God and then lead into beer.
Yeah,
that's funny. Oh, shit, looks like we lost pretty much everyone, huh?
Oh yeah, but yeah, I suppose you don't see too many of those kind of parody fantasy novels that much anymore since Pratchett left the scene.
Yeah, there's my wife found it actually. There's I forget, it's on like Prime or Netflix, I can't remember where. I think Prime. There's a cartoon D&D show that relies heavily on sort of adult humor.
Critical Role, I think.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Is it actually worth checking out?
It's pretty good. It's like if you've ever, I don't know, as a high school kid, I was into D&D.
I mean, I was going to say I play D&D like 3 times a week, so.
Nice.
That wasn't obvious. What?
I would like to get back into doing it just because I'm, mostly bored out of my skull a lot recently.
That's the problem is I tell people I do D&D a bunch, and then I have a bunch of people say, gosh, I wish I could do it. And I'm like, well, I'll run a group for you too. And then it's always
I actually
something.
sort of half-ass designed a D&D world once. And my idea was as a biologist, when you look at all the monsters in D&D, some of them are so fucking unrealistic.
Right.
So it's this lone monster. There's not a population of it.
There's a single Tarrasque. Yeah.
And it's gigantic. And what is it eating all this time? You gotta have an ecology and stuff like that. So I made a sort of I already sketched out the basics of a world where there were, enough of the standard D&D monsters, but it made, they lived in
To remain
populations
populated. Yeah.
and it made some sense,
That sounds
like
really entertaining.
what's a cube doing living in the bottom of a cave that gets visited once every 8,000 years, Yeah, I think its metabolism's not going to deal with that.
Yeah, ignoring the fact that something like a dragon or whatever is some like 100-foot tall vertebrate.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So essentially, I used science to squeeze all the fun out of D&D.
Like with the right group, you squeeze it in. To be fair, that sounds fun. Yeah, I've had friends kind of joke about that too, being like, it feels like D&D worlds never really think about the fact that there are literally wizards that can wish things into existence. Like, how does that not affect the economy? And
exactly,
like they're still ruled by kings, and same exact as our Middle Ages, but somehow you can just alter reality and go about your day.
And I always I don't know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but there's that one scene, and I forget what it was, one of the first three, where they land in an asteroid, and then and then it turns out, it's this giant worm that comes out, and I'm like, what is a giant worm eating inside a fucking asteroid field? How did it get to be that big? Like, are that many spaceships stopping by this asteroid field and landing in his mouth?
It's a recurring problem, I guess.
Like help me, seriously. It's a shuttle from Star Trek, and then somebody from Star Wars, and then somebody from Firefly, and this recurring.
Yeah. That's the real reason the Empire didn't follow them into the asteroid, is they're like, oh shit, this thing.
Yeah,
it's eating 100 people this month.
We're not following that again.
These dumbasses don't live here.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, I should get going.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's just basically two of us.
Well, yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope people got something out of it.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I know Teams was being kind of messy, but looks like you got sorted out.
It worked fine for me. I just logged right in, and I was like, bloop, there you go.
Awesome. Well, maybe catch you next time.
Okay. Talk to you
later.
later. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.